Ben from Georgetown, Texas. Ben, can you hear us? What's up?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool.
Hey, great show, Dan.
Thank you.
Good to speak to you. I understand you had some interesting experiences, and it led you to believe in the Norse pantheon and look into that a little deeper. And I was wondering if you can detail some other experiences that you had that you can definitely say, you know what, it's the Norse pantheon that makes all the sense in the world versus every other religion that's possibly out there. Like, how'd you come to that conclusion specifically?
Sure. So
share any of those experiences?
The polytheist position is not necessarily what you're kind of framing it as. I think that the Christian God probably exists. I think that other pantheons' gods probably exist. And in my personal practice, I'm an adherent to the Northern pantheon, but at the same time, I'm also an adherent to the Roman and the Celtic. So I don't think that I've been in polytheism for a while, and it's the general attitude that I've come across among other polytheists is that we don't, there's not like a rejection of other pantheons when we start to follow a specific tradition. We're following a tradition of the gods that we feel that we've attained a kind of relationship with, and that's more the path. Like, there's a good friend of mine that follows the Egyptian pantheon, another good friend of mine that follows a collection of pantheons where he's founded more in the Greek set. But we don't have, there's very little disagreement among us, that our beliefs confirm one another.
Well, how is there no disagreement between you if you have different pantheons? Seems like
we see the gods as all existing. What does that polytheism mean? Ultimately, as a philosophical position, becomes very additive. It doesn't become like it's more. I think that it winds up resulting in a more tolerant position than something that's more exclusionary, such as Christianity or Islam, where you wind up trying to like push away all of these ideas. Now, it's interesting that one could say something about kind of the behavior of Hinduism, but that's something that I don't necessarily know a whole lot about. But I've heard that there's a little bit of controversy there as far as how Hindus treat other faiths. But
so let me just ask you something. If it sounds like it's kind of additive and it kind of anybody can join in on this pantheon, like, what is the criteria? What is stopping you? What is stopping me from finding a book from an ancient mystical source and like adding that to my pantheon? I mean, is there a process to
even the Book of Eric?
Yeah, I'm just curious, because like let's say we discovered an ancient religion tomorrow from a civilization that we hadn't found anything from yet, and there's a whole pantheon of gods that they believed in. With that, I mean, could you
that
add
happens
that
often,
to your
actually.
pantheon?
Or that not necessarily often, but it's happened a few times. Like, I think that we've wound up discovering the Hittite pantheon. But as far as my personal practice, I don't necessarily venerate every single deity that I can possibly come across. There's deities that I foster a relationship with, and that's my personal practice. And there's other pagans that have their personal practice, and they foster relationships with those deities, and that's not a huge issue between us.
I got one more question.
All right, we'll let you get one more question in, Ben, and then I'm going to switch it off to somebody else.
Thank you. So what different legal structures or different laws would you like to see in place where you are based on your pantheon or multi-god beliefs that aren't instituted now? Legislation, new legislation.
I don't believe in legislating from the perspective of religious authority. As far like how we run our society, I believe in having a pluralistic attitude from a society of saying, all right, well, if you want to practice religion in public, fine, you can do that. We're not going to legislate from the bench on the basis of religious claims. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me. I think that it's like there's a conversation to be had about religion and society and how they kind of intermingle as far as culture is concerned. Christianity kind of messed things up a little bit when they created a religion that was to be distinct from culture, something that could be carried around and impressed on other cultures and become a cultural change piece. That's very like, it's based on these commands. And polytheism doesn't have that kind of attitude necessarily. It's more about personal relationship with deity, and you can discuss it as far as like how it results with being a social relationship with deity, but that's a conversation that's something that's you can more reference what happened in Rome with that, where you had a pluralistic attitude in Rome, where they were adding deities to the pantheon as they discovered new deities. But as far as like what legislation I would want to see, that doesn't none other than religious freedoms.
All right. Well, thanks for your call, Ben.